So today we're in section 1.4, comparing and ordering integers, section 1.4. All right, first thing we need to go over is some vocabulary. An integer is basically, when I say a whole number, I mean like an even number, so like 1, 2, 3, 4. It's not a fraction, it's not a decimal, it's not a square root. It's just, it lands right on those whole numbers. So, and it can also be positive or negative. Positive integers, any number greater than 0. Negative integers, any number less than 0. Absolute value is the number of units an integer is away from 0. It does not have a sign. It's not positive, it's not negative, it's just how many units is it away from 0. Okay, so in example 1, we're graphing and ordering these integers. So when I'm putting them in order, I need to understand how negative values work especially. Everybody understands, it's easier to understand positive values. Like if I were to ask you, which value is more, $100 or $1,000? $1,000. We know that the greater the number, the greater the value when it's positives. Well, it's just the opposite though with negatives. The greater the number in the negative, the lesser the value. Okay, so the farther away it gets from 0, the value actually decreases the farther it gets away. All right, so we need to have that in mind as we're setting up this number line. The first thing we do, and you have 2 of these on your homework tonight, we need to recognize what is the smallest value in this set of numbers. What's the smallest value? Negative 54. Again, because the larger the negative, the smaller the value. So if it's negative 54, I need to start it just past the negative 54, so I'm going to start it on a negative 60. Now, you might start it on negative 55. That's okay, and that would be fine too. All right, but we start just past that lowest number. Now, what is the largest number in the set? 15. So if I'm going from negative 60 to 15, do you think you're going to count by ones on your number line? No. Twos? No. Even fives? No. It's still going to be long. I'd probably go by tens. Anything more than tens would be maybe a little too much space. All right, but we can go by tens. And now that our number line's set up, we can start plotting our points on the number line. So the first point we see here is negative 35. So you see I have a point between the negative 30 and the negative 40, and it's labeled negative 35. I want you to go ahead and plot the points on your number line for the rest of the values. Negative 19, 15, negative 54, 7, and negative 2. So negative 35, then negative 19 goes just before the negative 20, then 15, negative 54, and negative 2. All right, does yours look like that? Does yours look like that, guys? Yes. All right, so now we can clearly see when we're looking at the number line that negative 54 is the lowest value and 15 is the highest value, and how the others fall in between. All right, so this just gives us a visual on, how their values compare to one another. All right, now on your homework tonight, you're going to have a number line, but you're also going to have it written like this. Let me switch over to paper mode real quick. It's going to say which value is bigger. So we're just going to number this number 1. Which value is bigger, negative 9 or negative 12? Or a better way for me to ask this is, what sign belongs in the blank? Is it a less than sign, a greater than sign, or an equal to sign? Negative 9 is greater than negative 12. What about this one? Negative 15 and negative 7. How do these numbers compare? Go ahead and write that on your paper. Would it be a less than or a greater than sign? And what do you think? It's less than, all right? Remember, it's closed off to the smaller value and opened up to the larger value. So you have a couple questions like that on your homework tonight. All right, so that's it for example 1. Now, in example 2, we're finding what we call absolute value. Absolute value, like I just mentioned a minute ago, is how many units it is away from 0. It's not... it does not have a sign. It's not positive. It's not negative. It's just how many units is it away from 0. So the absolute value of -5 is 5. The absolute value of 14 is 14. What do you think the absolute value of -8 is? 8. All right. And then 0? All right. Go ahead and do the last two. Absolute value of -13. And what's the absolute value of 18? 18. All right, now opposite value is exactly what it sounds like. It's just that many units away from 0 on the other side of 0. So opposite value is just going to be the opposite sign. So the opposite of 6 is, say it with me, -6. The opposite of -23 is positive 23. The opposite of 46, -46. 72. -18. 18. -6. 6. All right. So here's how it's going to look on not necessarily your homework, but maybe a quiz or a test. It's going to ask for both. So you're going to take one number and you're going to write the absolute value and the opposite of the number. It's important that you write it in that order. Absolute value first and then opposite if that's what it calls for. Because if you switch it up, your sign might be wrong even though you say, oh, well, I just wrote the opposite first. Well, there's no way for me to know that unless you specifically label it. So just, which is fine too, but just make sure that you write it absolute value then opposite. So let's go through this. The absolute value of 3 is 3. And then the opposite is -3. So I want you to box each of these individually. So you're saying absolute value comes first and then the opposite. What about 15?
15.
All right. And then -15. Go ahead and do the rest of them. All right. Absolute value of 7. -7? 7. Opposite? 7. All right, what about 0?
0.
0 and 0. We just box them in. 0 and 0. What about -9?
9.
9 and 9, and we just box them in. All right, absolute value and opposite. Now, in example 4, we are now going to take it to the next step and apply this algebraically. All right, and this is where you'll see just this next step from what basically we stopped last year at that example. Now we're going to take it one more example and we're going to substitute in a value and evaluate the expression using the rules for absolute and opposite value. All right, so if I have a -y as my original expression, so write that in your notes, when a y value is -5, here's what's going to happen. There's already a negative in the original expression, and now I'm plugging in another negative. So what do I have now? Yes, I have a positive. I have a positive, so it's just +5. So what you have to realize and remember is that if there's a negative in the original expression and you plug in a negative, that matters. It now becomes a double negative, and I need to evaluate it based on the rule. A double negative changes to a positive. Now let's look at the second one. 17 minus the absolute value of y. Well, what was my y value again?
5.
-5. So it's now -5. So what you need to realize here is absolute value brackets are not treated like parentheses. I need to evaluate the absolute value first and then look at my operation. So what's the absolute value of -5?
5.
Just 5. So 17 minus 5 is 12. You see the difference? Parentheses, double negative, yes, I changed to a positive. Absolute value brackets, that's not a double negative. Okay? It's not a double negative. All right, I want you to try the third one on your own. Here we have, again, the same situation where it's already a negative in the original expression. Did you catch that? All right, so when you plug in another negative, what do you get? A positive, very good. So now it's 5 plus 10, which is 15. Who got 15? Okay, very good. And that's what your homework is on, guys. So even though there's quite a few problems, 2 whole sections, numbers 26 through 40, is literally absolute value and opposite. That'll take you like 2 seconds just to write that down. You do have to write the original problem. So whatever's next to that number, you need to write the original problem. I did give you the even numbers, so that means only do the even numbers. So it would, I think it starts at number 18, so it would be 18, 20, 22, 24, 26. Only the even questions, not the odd questions. And if you understand that, that's everything you need to know for 1.4.